downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
Dermot Sugrue could have made a living as a professional cyclist in Ireland, but a post-university harvest job in Bordeaux led to a career making wine in England instead. After successful spells at Nyetimber and Wiston, he's been entirely focused on his own still and sparkling wine project, Sugrue South Downs, since 2022. He's a great storyteller as well as a gifted, intuitive oenologist, a man who loves words as much as he does chalk and bubbles. Hello, Dermot, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, hi, Tim. How you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to hear your voice. Where are you at the moment? Are you not at the winery, are you?
I'm not, no. I'm at home. I'm in Brighton. I'm about 200 yards from the seaside to my left.
Ah, fantastic. And we're talking in November, obviously, but you finished picking, haven't you? Even in England, you don't harvest this late, do you?
Well, there have been some years when it's quite late. I think the latest was the 6th of November, also the 4th of November for Chardonnay. But this year was remarkably early. Harvest has actually been 7 weeks long from the receipt of the first grapes, which was on the 12th of September, up until about, something like 7, 8, 9 days ago when we received the very, very last Pinot Noir from Essex for red winemaking. Yeah, so
you're very, very busy during that period, obviously. It's months as well, right?
It's actually been extremely manageable for us because, you know, the new winery, this is the third vintage at our new Sugrue South Downs winery, which is at Beetree Vineyard in Wivelsfield Green. Now I've got a great team together. We're into the groove. We've got all the kit that we need. We've been totally optimized for sparkling wine production for many, many, many years. And just this year, we've really optimized the winery for still wine production, particularly red wine production.
Hallelujah. Now, as people can probably hear, you've got this very slight, very beautiful Irish accent, and you were born, weren't you, Limerick in Ireland. I want to ask you a little bit about your upbringing, your background, because it's fascinating. You know, how early you started making booze for a start. But what did your parents do? I mean, were they interested in food and wine?
Absolutely, hugely so. My dad was a vet, and he spent his life in the food industry. He was a veterinary inspector for meat processing plants, worked with the Department of an Ryan Tolviach agus Iasca, the Department of Food and the Environment. My mother was a fantastic chef, and she was actually the one who loved wine. But they kept horses. Their passion was horses, was show jumping. So I grew up in that environment, basically horses all around me. And then all around that was Frisian cows milking from the limestone soils in the Golden Vale, which is, you know, the area of Limerick.
Sounds idyllic. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read that you made your first beer when you were 15 and your first wine from imported grape juice when you were 16. Who encouraged you? Was that your mum, your dad, or someone else?
It was kind of my dad. My dad went golfing with Sean O'Connor, who was the headmaster of our primary school, and he came back after a game of golf. And Sean had planted this seed in my father's mind that my dad should make his own beer, just like Sean O'Connor did. And I remember watching my dad. He came home from Limerick one day, and he bought all the kit from the home brew shop in Limerick. And I remember just looking at him in the kitchen as he kind of flustered about the place. Because my dad is no cook. He's not very familiar with doing anything operational or practical in the kitchen. And I just some urge came over me, and I said, "Dad, let me do this. I'll do this." So he went, "Okay, away you go." So that's when I started making beer. And then a local archdeacon, because my mum is Church of Ireland Protestant, which is very, very unusual in the south of Ireland, or at least was back then. And my dad Catholic, of course. But a local archdeacon saw my passion for making beer, and he gave me a bottle of elderberry port that he had made himself. He was a late I forget what the word is when you join the church, a late calling to the clergy. And he worked in a big jam factory in Dublin all of his life, Chiver's Jam. So he was a fruit man. And I remember tasting that elderberry port he'd made, and I just thought, wow, I'm going to make this. So before I ever imported any grape juice, I was making wines from elderberries, elderflower, the whole range of stuff, through to parsnip wine, which was not just a moving experience, but a psychologically mind-bending experience.
Well, brilliant. And I mean, writing runs in your family, doesn't it? You know, writers of poems and short stories and a dictionary, famous dictionary. And I read that you wanted to become a pro cyclist at one point, but after school, your plan was to study journalism, wasn't it, at City University and become a journalist? So what happened? Why didn't you become a journalist? I'm glad you didn't for your sake, mate, I'll tell you.
Probably. We were all, three out of my four brothers, or rather, 3 out of the 4 of us brothers were competitive road racing cyclists growing up in Ireland, at underage level through to under 16s. And this, of course, you may remember this or you may not, Tim. 2 of the greatest cyclists in the world at the time were Sean Kelly and Stephen Roach.
Absolutely.
Two inspirational Irishmen. So I thought as a 12-year-old, 14-year-old that my future would be in France as a professional cyclist. Little did I know that I'd wash up there a few decades later in Bordeaux making wine. Writing and the creative side of things has been huge in my family. My father's side of the family, a very kind of Irish establishment. He was my grandfather, Micheál Sugrue, the chap who wrote the dictionaries, the Gaeilge Béarla Gaeilge dictionary still used in Irish schools today, was actually the chief inspector of schools in Ireland. His brother was An Seabhach. Now, An Seabhach, that was his pen name. That means the hawk. And Sugrue, which is the Irish name for Sugrue, Sugrue, actually comes from the red-haired hawk. So there was a nice little line there. But he was one of Ireland's greatest short story writers and poets, and also deeply involved in the Irish Rebellion. In fact, led to the 1916 uprising. He was just about to lead his division from Kerry to head up to the GPO in Dublin, and he got the message, don't come. Don't come. Yeah. So it's very, very interesting, all that side of my family. And, I don't remember them hugely well. My grandfather died when I would have been 12, I think. I always just been very embarrassed when he spoke to me in Irish, and I wasn't able to really form articulate sentences back to the man.
Yeah. I mean, so you didn't do journalism because you couldn't afford to live in London, wasn't that the reason? So you went to UEA, which is in Norwich, University of East Anglia, and you originally wanted to study media studies and French, despite never having been to France. Then you switched, I believe, to environmental sciences, despite never having studied sciences. You clearly like a challenge, don't you? I mean,
indeed. And when the media studies course started, it was the first time that UEA had offered it, and they just cobbled it together from the School of Social Sciences and the School of English and things like this. And all they did for the first 3 months was talk about the BBC. And of course, growing up in Ireland, I'd never seen the BBC.
You were RTE man, right?
I'm an RTE, Radio Telefísión, exactly. That's so. I thought, and I realised that at University of East Anglia, it was the most highly regarded School of Environmental Sciences in Europe. They've got the Centre for Climate Research there, and I had a few friends who are doing environmental science, so I switched over and I did that. I enjoyed the course, but it was pretty full on because I hadn't done physics, chemistry, or biology at higher level at school.
Well, as I said, you clearly like a challenge. I mean, you left university and you worked as a financial advisor for a bit, didn't you?
Indeed, yeah. Initially with Richard Branson's company, Virgin Direct, as it was called back then, before it's Virgin Money, selling personal equity plans and life insurance and pensions and investments over the phone, which was a very new thing back in 1997.
Yeah.
You used to buy your personal equity plans from your stockbroker in a pinstripe suit, and not quite with a bowler hat back then, but
almost.
Indeed. But no, doing that on the phone because, of course, I can talk. I'm good at creating rapport.
I could see why people would buy something from you. I mean, you've got the gift of the gab, and also, you come from a family that loved words, right, and language. So.
Exactly, and like my father, I like people. I'm very interested in people. Very often, people come to the winery, and all they want to hear about is me. But I actually like to hear about them and ask what they're doing, why they're here.
So you got this job as financial advisor, and then the wine bug bit, right? And you went to Bordeaux to do a harvest at l'Église Clinée, Pomerol, famous Denis. And I think 2001, 2002, you went back, didn't you? You went to Lévis-Barton, Saint-Julien. Was that the kind of Irish connection working with the Bartons? I mean, were you thinking at that point, I want to do wine?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, wine dominated, making wine from age 16, 17, 18 in Ireland kind of dominated my thing, because we were actually forced, I suppose is the correct word, to, when our main exams came along age 16 to 18, to give up cycling, we were so focused on sport. we were at a very, very high level. You know, we were competing at the highest level in Ireland. All three of my brothers, Boz, my brother who I've named the Blanc Blanc shirt.
He's got a wine after him, yeah.
He was All-Ireland champion. I came second. I was silver medalist, beaten by bloody Aidan Crowley, a fellow who I'd beaten in sprint finishes all year. And he beat me in the All-Irelands, that guy. And my brother Darragh was a very talented cyclist as well. He represented Ireland on a junior tour of the Isle of Man, etc. Anyway, but when it came to study, we took that very seriously, or at least our parents did. So I gave up cycling, and that's when I spent my time trying to pretend to be Bob Dylan with a harmonica around my neck and an acoustic guitar, and making booze.
So that's why you went to Bordeaux, because you thought, I'm going to rekindle the love of booze, or of making booze, right?
Indeed, and horses actually were hugely involved, because, you know, I mentioned my dad was a vet, but he was also Ireland's most senior equestrian judge. With the Fédération Equestrienne Internationale in Lausanne in Switzerland, and he was the officiating judge at equestrian events all over the world.
Wow!
And in 2000, the year 2000, he called me and said, "Dermot, I'm the foreign judge at the Bordeaux International Horse Show. I'm in a hotel room. Do you want to come and stay with me?" So I was like, straight over there, and that was my first experience of Bordeaux. And I was like, yeah, a year later, I'm going to come back. I remember I was introduced to the Barton family, to Anthony, and I had a conversation with them. This is when I was at L'Église Clinée the next year. And unfortunately, they didn't have time to see me, but they said, no, that's wrong. In 2000, I had a conversation, and then they said, come back. And we had lunch. So after my L'Église Clinée harvest, I had lunch with them. And I spent 4 hours with Anthony and Lillian Barton, just the three of us. And it was remarkable, because they were fascinated by me, or it appeared that way. That's how they made me feel.
I think they made everybody feel that way. They were just amazing people, right?
Yeah, exactly. We had the 83 Langlois, we had 85 Léoville. We had a Chateau Carbonieux white wine at the start. I remember we had a fantastic lunch, and they said, "Come back and do the do the 2002 vintage with them," which I did, and that was the transformative experience of my life, actually.
So basically, you switched careers, didn't you? And you went to study. You thought about going to Roseworthy, I think, in Adelaide, in Australia, but instead you went to Plumpton College, Agricultural College, to study viticulture and enology, right?
Yep.
And while you were at Plumpton, you got this job as assistant winemaker at Nyetimber under Peter Morgan. So how did you get that job? Was it something that was offered to various students, or did you just read about it somewhere?
Literally, I saw it, pinned up onto a notice board in somewhere in Plumpton College. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, I'm getting that job. That job is mine. Assistant winemaker at Nyetimber. I'd never been to Nyetimber before. I hadn't tasted the wines, but I'd read about them. I'd read about what Stuart and Sandy Moss had achieved there. I was one of the only students. In fact, there was only 3 of us out of a cohort of about 33 who were actually working at wineries or vineyards at the same time as studying. So I'd spend 3 days a week at Plumpton in Sussex, get into my little Renault Clio 1.9 diesel van and drive up to Suffolk, where I was working 4 days a week at that winery, and then I won't say fill it up with red diesel and drive it down to Plumpton and do my next 3 days. So when I saw that advert, I thought, right, I'm going to go. And literally, I phoned up Peter Morgan and I said, I can come for an interview today. And a couple of hours later, I'd got the job. And, I'd just also come back from Léoville Barton. So I was cock a hoop. And Peter knew exactly about the Barton family, and look, it just worked. It felt like, and then of course, I was assistant winemaker at the leading winery in the UK whilst I was studying at Plumpton, and something had to give. So I actually gave up. I bailed out in April of the first year at Plumpton because I was effectively working 6 days a week at Nyetimber.
So did you never finish it?
No, I didn't. They still list me as one of the alumni, a distinguished alumni of Plumpton College, Dermot Sugrue. I didn't finish the first year.
Oh, I love it. It's a brilliant story. And then he left, didn't he? Peter left. He went to work at Plumpton, didn't he? So you then got, not dead man shoes. He was still alive, but you got his job, basically.
It's true. A key person in all of this was Jean-Manuel Jacquinot, who was the consultant winemaker for Nyetimber from very, very early days. And obviously I was working very closely with Jean-Manuel and Peter. And it was Jean-Manuel who suggested that I would be very good for the role. And at this stage, it was Andy and Nicola Hill who owned Nyetimber. They had purchased it from the mosque.
And he was a musician, wasn't he? Was he in Bucks Fizz or something like that? Or was
he was the creative force. They were the creative force behind Bucks Fizz. So they wrote in fact, I own the piano that Andy Hill wrote, Making Your Mind Up.
Making Your Mind Up.
It's in the lease aging cellar. It's surrounded by bottles of Sugrue. Yeah. So look, I was promoted very, very quickly into the head winemaker position in April 2004 at Nyetimber, and it was a sink or swim moment. And I think what helped me enormously was I spent a huge amount of time in Champagne. In fact, over the next 10, 15 years, I spent a huge amount of time in Champagne. It's very, very quick to visit Reims or Epernay from Sussex. You're there in 6-7 hours or whatever. And I developed a real network of friends and colleagues and journalists, etc., in Champagne since those years. And of course, I was buying kit and buying equipment and buying all my corks and my wire hoods and my supplies and my stillages and my bottles and stuff from there. I speak French. Yeah. I just developed a great network of so what I like to say is I'm an Irishman who makes English wine, but I'm French trained.
I like that. Very good. I mean, 2006 was a bit of a pivotal year for you, wasn't it? Because, you left Nyetimber, you did a harvest in Champagne with the Jacquinot family. New project came your way, which is Wiston, where you were to spend, how many years there? 17 years, was it? Or
am I 16 years, from 2022.
16 years, wasn't it? And you had a call from a religious order, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Yeah. Let's deal with the first three things, come back to the fourth. I mean, did 2006 feel like a year of change, a pivotal moment for you? I mean, was it scary, a bit traumatic, all these different things going on at once?
It was traumatic, actually, because that's the year that Nyetimber was sold. That Andy Hill and his darling wife Nicola got divorced, and it was the divorce that precipitated the sale.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. That's when Eric Hirma came in and purchased Nyetimber, and that was a dramatic time because Nyetimber had historically been 15 hectares and producing about 50,000 bottles of wine. And suddenly Nyetimber became massively bigger in the space of 1 month. In May 2006. Another 60 hectares were planted. So it went from 15 to 75 hectares in that 1 month. And that's when I decided that it wasn't for me. I'd always wanted to start my own project. The year before, I had been approached by two people, really, by two sets of people. Father Paul McMahon of the Storrington Priory Vineyard, who asked if I'd explore planting a small vineyard on the Norbertine Order monastery grounds, which I ended up doing.
They're the white cannons, right, aren't they?
That is exactly it, the white cannons of Premontré. Yeah. He was a fascinating man, Father Paul. Absolutely lovely, delightful, charming man. He'd been the head prior of Storrington Priory for 23 years. He was a boy soprano when he was young and smoked fags. He was a good lad. Loved Father Ted.
It sounds like my kind of priest, basically.
Indeed. But also the year before, I'd met Harry and Pip Goring.
Yeah.
And Harry and Pip Goring has expressed an interest in planting a vineyard. So it seemed like the correct confluence of events for me to leave Nyetimber in 2006, plant my own vineyard, and then start the Wiston Estate project with the Goring family.
Yeah. So your own vineyard was effectively the Storrington Priory Vineyard. I mean, who gave you the money to plant it? Presumably it was on their land, right?
On their land, they funded it.
They funded it.
The whole ethos of it that Father Paul put to me at the time was they wanted to do this as a community project to be able to invite kids from local schools and particularly, city schools to participate in agriculture and actually in viticulture. It was just down the road from where Nyetimber was. So Nyetimber was kind of a local hero story for the people of Storrington and West Chiltington and Pulborough, etc. So it seemed like a good idea. And look, it turned out to be an absolutely fantastic little vineyard.
And did you know that when you saw it? Did you sense that in a sense, as it were?
I had a hunch that it could be really, really good. I didn't really know what was underneath the ground there. It's right on the border of the South Downs National Park as chalk goes to green sand on that northern edge of the South Downs National Park in West Sussex. I never dug a hole deep enough to find out what was actually there, but I found out over the years the initial 1 hectare vineyard that we planted in 2006, had a dramatic difference in pH in both sides of the site. Absolutely dramatic. I'm talking about one of them was 6.2 and the other was like 7.8. So you're definitely on a kind of a fault line or a transition line between the green sand, which would be around 6.5 pH, and of course the chalk, which is going to be much closer to 7.5 or even 8.0. So there's obviously interesting stuff going on under the soil there. And I think that's why the first wines, and basically I planted a field blend. I planted dominant Chardonnay with Pinot Noir, no Pinot Meunier. That was the blend I had in my head. So that's how I planted the vineyard like that. Yeah. And I think that's why the wines were so complete, because there is actually a mosaic of different geologies there underneath the soil, as well as being.
But you didn't dig a foot soil pit or anything like that, which people would do now, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, but there wasn't really a choice of planting anywhere else.
Listen, we're going to come back to that vineyard.
The key thing, it was free draining soil, It was sandy soil and with a chalky base. And the aspect of it was very interesting. It was quite protected. It was on the top of a wee little hill. So frost is the last place in Storrington to get frosted, because it's on a little dome at the top. And it had brilliant exposure to southern sunshine.
We're going to come back to that vineyard when we talk a little bit more about the wines, but let's just talk about Wiston for a bit, because you were there 16 years, as you said. But what was your proudest achievement when you were there? Was it just taking it from nowhere to being one of the greatest wines of the UK and famous around the world?
I'll tell you, because I remember telling people at the time it was my proudest achievement. We'd won the Decanter Trophy many times. We'd won IWC, IWSC, the Tom Stevenson. We'd won trophies for years. But in 2018, exactly 10 years after I had made the first wines there in 2008, we won Wine GB Winery of the Year for the first time. And that was exactly a decade after I had repurposed and refurbished an old turkey abattoir and turned it into the UK's best winery within a decade. And that I think felt like my greatest achievement. And then, of course, listen to this, we went on to win it 5 times in the next 6 years after that.
Wow, that's not bad, is it? I mean, you once told in an interview, I think it was Margaret Rand, that you're not a great respecter of rules and you don't fit into corporate culture very well. I mean, I share that opinion myself as well. Was it hard working for other people, both at Nyetimber and Wiston? Did you find that a bit of a struggle sometimes?
Nothing like as hard as it was working for financial services companies, because that's dull. That was so regimented and hierarchical and boring. No, look, working for Andy Hill at Nyetimber was just a hoot. I mean, the guy was absolutely hilarious. The guy was a genius. We once went on a plane to Turin to look at buying a Guy labeling machine. And Andy, I was sitting down beside him, and after 15 minutes, he put the times down. He'd done the cryptic crossword in about 15 minutes. This guy was clever as hell, and he liked a beaker, and sometimes he went off the rails. We had great fun. We had great rapport. I think he liked my kind of creative and different kind of
and gave you space in a way to express it.
Totally gave me a very, very long leash. And then when I was at Wiston Estate, also Harry and Pip Goring, we had a magnificent relationship. We still do, and they realised that I work my best when I'm just let loose. And that's what I was able to do. And I came up with the idea very, very early on at Wiston Estate that the only way we could make this project happen financially was for me to offer contract winemaking services.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because you worked for 30 different labels, I think?
Oh, yeah.
Did you enjoy it? I mean, was it useful? Did it teach you stuff?
Oh, it was imperative financially to allow the project to happen, because like many large estates, they're asset rich and cash very, very poor. Hence, this abandoned turkey factory was what I took on. When I told them that it was perfect to transition into a winery, they were kind of aghast, They were kind of thinking, why aren't you using some of the lovely old Sussex barns that we have in our 6,500 acre property here on the Downs? And I was like, because this building is perfect. It's huge. It was like 5,000 square foot. And it's made of concrete and steel, so it's cold. It was in a bit of a need of of polishing it up a little bit. We were polishing a turd by all means, but it was eminently suitable, you know. I filled the place with stainless steel tanks. I brought over a traditional cocker basket press.
Which you've still got, haven't you?
Which is still there in Wiston. Yeah, it's still there. Put it on the first floor so we could have gravity feed of juice into the tanks in the barrel hole down below. And I was able to offer a contract winemaking service, which meant that the winery earned revenue right from the very first vintage in 2008, revenue by pressing other people's grapes, by bottling other people's wines, by storing their wine on lees for 3, 4, 5 years in the cellar, by riddling, disgorging, labeling, palletizing, and doing everything for this new raft of vineyard owners that were arriving, what Stephen Skelton calls the Nyetimber effect. People planting vineyards left, right, and centre all over the south of England and in other corners of England. And of course, they needed winemakers. They needed somebody to make their wine. And because of my reputation from Nyetimber, people put their confidence in me. And for me, it was a laboratory to experiment and learn from. So I developed a massive amount of experience in those 16 years, making so many wines for so many people.
Tell me a little bit about vintages in England, because they vary considerably. They can be very challenging. 2012 or 2024, when you said you picked the final grapes on the 6th of November. On the other hand, you've got some amazing vintages, and you've talked about both 22 and 23 as near perfect. Is climate change helping to make things a bit more predictable, or is it as unpredictable as ever?
It allows the winemaking to be better, the quality inherently of the wines to be better, because we're achieving more fundamental ripeness in our grapes, which immediately impacts wine quality and wine ageability. But it's the unpredictable variability of weather, weather events, that is probably the most challenging thing. I heard a good quote recently, climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. Yeah. And we kind of see this. I mean, look at this year, for example, the driest summer in 100 years and 4 heat waves. Last year, 2024, miserable. We didn't have any heat spikes whatsoever. We had one of the wettest springs and no real heat spikes at all in 2024. And back in 2023 was an abundant year. And we had a heat wave in October, which got everything ripe. That was an amazing kind of final sprint to the line in 23. And then 2022 was the warmest ever temperatures in the UK. The first time we saw north of 40 degrees centigrade.
I remember that summer. Wow. I mean, it was...
Indeed.
It was like being in Australia. It really was.
It was phenomenal, absolutely. That's when we made our first red wine from Essex. And that actually had a huge effect on both myself and Anna. Anna, my wife, has been working making wine all over the world and indeed was teaching winemaking at Plumpton. And she left Plumpton to become the first ever full-time employee of Sugrue South Downs. when we did that 2022 vintage together, which ironically was the year I left Wiston Estate, and we set up on our own, or at least we poured all of our energies exclusively into Sugrue. And that 22 vintage happened, where we ended up making a red wine, which we've just released from Essex, and making a white wine, which is the fastest ever selling wine that we've ever released. This crazy wine called
This is bonkers, which is literally that's the name of the wine, isn't it? But you started making wine under your own label called The Trouble with Dreams in 2008, but that wine was never released, was it? Because did the birds get all the grapes or something like that? Was that true?
We never made the wine.
We never made it. Not as if you got as far as making it.
We didn't. Well, myself, I did a crop estimate the day before we were going to pick. To work out how many crates you need, how many pickers you need, what's the, what size, how many trailers you're going to need to go back and forth to the winery. And I estimated it was 1,000 kilos, 1 ton of fruit, enough to make about 750 bottles of wine. So we got together a few people and the right amount of picking crates. Birds had devastated the entire vineyard overnight. We picked 15 kilos instead of 1,000 kilos.
And this was the Storrington Priory vineyard, yeah?
This is the Storrington Priory vineyard.
The first vintage... planted in 16, you're about to make the wine in 18, birds got it. So the first vintage you made was 19. And I just wondered...
Sorry, 2009.
2009, sorry.
Right,
2008. And did the success of that first vintage, did that surprise you, the maiden release, how well received it was?
Totally. Because I remember showing that wine when I released it in 2013 at a Holgarten tasting because I started working with Steve Daniels. Steve sniffed me out and he came down to the winery. Steve wanted to represent Wiston actually, and we'd already started working with Rebecca Palmer at Corney and Barrow on Wiston, and because that gentleman's handshake had taken place, I said, "Can't do that." But you could, if you want, represent Sugrue. I've made this wine, Trouble with Dreams. He tasted it and he just went, absolutely, let's go for it. And I remember showing that wine at the Dorchester tasting in 2013 and meeting for the first time Robin Davis of Swig and Damon. And they tasted the wine, and basically Robin said, "I want to buy, what's your production?" I said, "I made 600 bottles." And he said, "I want to buy all of it." And Steve came in and he said, no, you can't. It doesn't work like that. But I didn't even have a label on the bottle at the time. I didn't have a foil on it. I just had a little dog tag on it. And I had my wee little, what do they call those, iPads, one of those first iPods, with the generated image of the label, which had been done for me. It's a brilliant label, fabulous label. It had been done for me by Kevin Shaw of Stranger and Stranger. Did it as a favor because he adored my dog. My dog Noodles. He adored Noodles because he couldn't have his own dog in town in London. So he designed the label for me.
I love it.
Look, I knew that 2009 was very, very special because when you feel the summer, you feel the year. But looking at the analytical parameters of the fruit that year, it was a phenomenal thing. It's what in Champagne they call a 10-10 year. Okay, so it's when you've got very, very high maturity in terms of sugar in the grapes, and instead of having a correspondingly low level of acid, which would be typical and normal, you have this very high level of acid. So 10. Percent in potential alcohol, and then 10 grams per litre in sulfuric acid, because that's how the French do it, of acidity. And this is what makes it typically vintage year in Champagne, rather than a Brut sans année.
I like the 10-10. So you've gone from that 1 hectare, you're now, 12 hectares? And I think you own one vineyard, but how many different vineyards do you buy fruit from?
So we've Storrington, Mount Harry Vineyard, which is one of our Grand Cru.
And that was also planted in 2006, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yes, by the Renton family, by Alice Renton and her husband, Tim Renton. And I started renting that vineyard from them in 2013. That was after that miserable 12 harvest, which was the coldest, darkest and wettest in 100 years. So I realized that I needed a second source of fruit. So that's when Mount Harry came along. And then Cold Harbour Vineyard, one of my contract winemaking clients at Wiston. That's the oldest vineyard, planted in 2005. And that's our biggest vineyard. So we lease that vineyard as well. And funnily enough, the two people who run that vineyard for me, Lisa and Jeff, they worked for me at Nyetimber 20 years ago. Lisa was managing the vineyard at Nyetimber, so they're full-time employees of Sugrue South Downs now, and they take care of that large vineyard, 7.3 hectares in West Sussex on Chalk. And then B-Tree we acquired when we bought the land and the vineyard to turn an old tractor barn into a winery 3 years ago. So
and you're buying a little bit of fruit in Essex as well for the Pinot, right?
We're working with a handful of growers in Essex. Particularly, we're working with Duncan McNeil, who is the viticultural consultant, friend of mine for many years, and he's really the guy who's put Essex on the map for making it a premium still winemaking region, or for discovering that is the best place in the UK.
It's an amazing thought, isn't it, that Essex is potentially one of the great wine producing areas of the world. I mean,
look, I've said this a few times in the last few weeks because I firmly believe it now. The Crouch Valley is the most exciting emerging wine region on the planet, in my view. It is phenomenally interesting. Fruit at 13.5 to 14% natural potential alcohol. It's mind-boggling, Tim.
It's unbelievable. Listen, I want to ask you a little bit about your winemaking style. Henry Jeffries called your wines lean and racy. I just wondered, do you like that as a description? I wondered who influenced the style, because you do have a style, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I like the wines to be precise. That's why, when I talked about this field blend of that I planted the original Trouble with Dreams vineyard, let's call it Storrington, Chardonnay dominant, more or less about 60%, sometimes up to 2/3 Chardonnay. Then with Pinot Noir, no Meunier. So I wanted that precision, that focus, that drive, of Chardonnay, supported by a little bit of structure from the Pinot Noir. The fruity, fragrant, floral nature of Pinot Meunier, that's perfect in other wines, but not for the Trouble with Dreams. I wanted it to be, linear and have that kind of focus.
I mean, you're a bit of a Chardonnay nut, aren't you? I mean, you were kind of brought up on the champagnes of the Côte des Blancs, really, of the Chardonnay wines, yeah.
Correct, yeah. When I based myself in Champagne, I was either staying in Epernay or Reims with Jean-Manuel and his wonderful family, the Jacquinots, or I was in Avis, and with some other very, very good friend of mine, Didier Pearson and Imogen Whitaker. Which is right beside the Lycée Viticole, actually, the Avis. But that was my kind of base for visiting Cramont and Le Mesnil, Sorgé, and these other towns. And those are these are the wines that most inspired me. Was that, again, that precision and the clarity of beautiful Chardonnay grown on shore.
I just wonder, do you take the same approach to still wines as you do to sparkling ones, and in terms of the way you think about the wines? I mean, obviously, you're making them in a different way, but because they're different processes. But are you bringing the same style to that as well?
To the white wine. So first of all, the red wine. There's a reason I ended up in Bordeaux all those years ago, because I fundamentally adore red wine, and I think that's an amazing challenge for me now at this stage of my career. However, when we made the first still wine, Bonkers, it's a multi-vintage Chardonnay in a Solera. So it's actually a style of wine that I worked out could fit in very practically with making my sparkling wines. Because, of course, we use an awful lot of barrels in making Trouble with Dreams, making Cuvée Balls, making the other sparkling wine cuvées. And it's a perfect thing once we take that wine out of barrel, fill it up with Bonkers, fill it up, the best way to keep a barrel healthy and fresh and clean, and therefore get great longevity out of it, is always have wine in it. So it works out very, very well in the winery to kind of to dovetail sparkling wine production with having a Solera of Chardonnay.
Because it's a non-vintage blend, basically, isn't it?
It's a multi-vintage blend. Come on, get with the times. Nobody says
multi-vintage, yeah. And I love, and then the real name of the wine is not just Bonkers. It's Bonkers Zombie Robot Alien Monsters from the feature Ate My Brain. Sur Lee. I love the Sur Lee bit. So tell me, is that inspired by Thomas Dolby? It sounds like a Thomas Dolby album, was it?
I don't know who Thomas Dolby is.
Oh, God.
I'll look him up.
You've got to look that up. There was an album of his called a song called Aliens Ate My Buick.
Oh, wow. I love him even more.
I'll pass it on to you. Anyway.
Do indeed. No, this is it was just some phrases that have been percolating through my brain for many, many years. And look, we're making so I can't discount Anna's contribution to this, because Anna, is making wine in New Zealand, California. She even made the wine in Peru to make pisco. That was her first job after she did her master's in viticulture and enology. But then she spent the main focus of her career in Germany, but then in Austria. So making Gruner Veltliner and Riesling at Schloss Gobelsberg with Michael Moosbrugger. And then she went to Umatum in Burgenland with Joseph, and she was making, Blaufränkisch and St. Laurent and Zweigelt.
But it's interesting, the relationship between you and, winemaking terms, because I think you describe her as being a bit more scientific and a bit more precise. You're a bit more intuitive. Would that be true?
I think that's a pretty fair way to describe it. I'd be quite a risk taker and adventurous by nature, and really quite instinctive and intuitive in the way that I go. I'm not really led by analysis and things like this. I kind of go with my gut on things, and this creative streak, I allow myself follow it. I'm compelled to follow it. Anna certainly would be more analytical. There's a great phrase that Harry Goring used to use about his relationship with Pip Goring, his wife, and said, Harry Goring's foot is over the brake while hers is over the accelerator, and that's kind of the way we work. So it's good. It's a little bit of chaos and order, I'd say.
Do you ever disagree about wine styles?
Oh yeah, all the time. Absolutely, all the time. Well, what's it Anna says? What's the secret to a great marriage? Winning.
But you've both got to have wins, right? You can't just win all the time.
Exactly. No, look. Since we had our darling little boy Ronnie, aka Ronster the Monster, who's now just over.
He's been
3
very
years.
quiet, I have to say. He's in the next room, and he's been very quiet.
Maybe it's the onset of chickenpox, and the poor boy is quieting him down. Or maybe Minions is on the TV. He's pretty much himself and his father are seriously into Minions. Actually, no, Anna is less. Involved in the day-to-day operations in the winery, and Anna's actually morphed into a one-woman sales wave.
That's what we like.
By becoming the sales director. But it's a real compliment. Her experience is deeply in still winemaking, whilst mine has been much more focused over recent decades in making bubbles.
Yeah.
And now we've got the opportunity to make what we feel is world-class still wines in England.
Yeah.
What a wonderful new adventure to go on.
No, I think it's fantastic. Final question is, how do you get away from wine? Do you still like to cycle? Do you still make beer?
I don't make beer. I'm actually not a fan of beer at all this stage in my life. I'm thinking maybe I'm too worried it'll just make me fat.
Exactly what I feel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like drinking liquid bread, isn't it? So I still love cycling. In fact, about a decade and a half ago, cycling came rushing back into my life. So I've got a Pinarello road bike. I've actually got 3 road bikes, so I'll go there. And took up mountain biking because a very, very close friend of mine had an accident on a road bike, and he only rides on the mountains. And I was living at the foot of the Downs, when I was at Wiston. So able to just go up onto the ridge of the South Downs. So I adore doing that. That's how I like to switch off and get away, because it turns me into a teenager. When I get on a bike, I feel like I'm a teenager again. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, is there?
There certainly isn't. I can completely empathise with that. Listen, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Such fun. I mean, and I think the wines you're making are brilliant. And, you've come at it from a different angle, basically. And lots of risks you've taken, really, to get where you've got to, right?
Yeah, look, I've been very entrepreneurial. I've had to be. I didn't start with a fortune or an inheritance or land or any of those things. Yeah. In fact, it is an absolute truism that, during the first 10 years of Sugrue South Downs, I made more money selling black plastic picking crates to new vineyards in the UK than I ever made from selling bottles of wine. And that's really what supported the business in the early years.
That's the economics of wine, isn't it? God.
This is it. You got to flog other stuff to get in a position to build up enough stock over the years to then have stock to sell, Yeah. And if I look to where we are now, we've got people like Hugh Bonneville, Hugh Johnson.
They've invested in you, haven't they? Robin Hudson, all these amazing people have invested in you, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Robin Hudson, Peter Chittick.
Yeah.
Extraordinary people who are backing myself and Anna.
No pressure.
No worries. Broad shoulders, like yourself, Tim.
Exactly. You got to go there. Anyway, listen, a pleasure talking to you, and I'll see you very soon. So I'm going to send you a Thomas Dolby track, and the next time I see you, we're going to share a bottle of Legley's Clinet and toast Denis, right? Basically, because what a lovely man he was. Thank you, my friend. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Tim. You too. Bye.
Well, I reckon Dermot would have made a great journalist, but I'm really glad he became an outstanding winemaker instead. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is the art historian and wine writer, Dr. Christina Macris, who'll be talking about her new book, Art in Vineyards. Join me then.
Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, @timatkin, and on Instagram, @timatkinmw. See you next week.